I gotcha. We measure time by cycle ages, and the gate to every age redeem a milestone in the journey of the race. Welcome to Gate to the Age Explorations into Post-Disclosure Reality. I'm your host, Sharif ANAEL-BEY. I'm very excited. This is my second episode, and I'm extremely excited to have one of my mentors, as our guest. We go way back. We're going to talk about that, like way back. He's a longtime practical occultist, prolific author, lecturer, and authority on that and ufology. He's well known for his groundbreaking work, and I have my original copy. Secret Cipher of the UFONAUTS. Please welcome Alan Greenfield. How are you, sir?
I'm okay, peace, and I'm glad to be here.
Outstanding. So listen, first, tell us about your background. How did you become acquainted with occult studies and with ufology?
Well, those are tougher questions than it sounds like, because it seems to me that my interest goes back to early childhood. And the reason I say that is because my parents were prone to go to Miami every July. They'd go down on what passed for roads in those days, avoiding the speed trap in Ludowici, Georgia. Yeah. And my father would stay for a week and go back and work for 2 weeks and come back for a week. And so my mother and I were there for a month every summer. Right. And I don't remember exactly when, but it was sometimes in July 1952 when I was but a little being from Earth. And my father was mentioning the headline story of that period, which was flying saucers. The term UFO didn't even exist at that point, seen over the White House and Pentagon and the Capitol. That was big news, because that was restricted airspace even back then. And, or even more so back then, I guess. So why I would remember that, I don't know, but I picked up on it immediately because it was somewhere in my lane, even though I was, let's do the math, 5 years old.
Wow.
Turned 6 that November, but.
Wow. Interesting. And then, I have similar, people ask me about martial arts, and even I've been a martial artist since age 5, right? Well, yeah, age 5. But at age 4, I saw a martial arts demonstration. My father took me, and it was like it chose me. You know what I mean? And so for my 5th birthday, he got me lessons. Now, to your point, the one thing I remember earlier than being a martial arts aficionado at age 5 was being a graphic artist. And all I drew were spaceships and airplanes. And I told my mother that I wanted to be someone who designed either spaceships or airplanes or flew in them.
Me too.
At an early age. Wow, that's crazy.
Also, because of the time, I also drew my design for fallout shelters. Maybe I should get back into that now, considering.
Ooh, yeah, exactly.
There's a new market for it.
Yes, it is.
Build quickly is my sage advice there.
Absolutely. Build fast. Wow. Okay. So, like I said, you and I go way back, back to my college days. I've always been, had a very keen interest in ufology, the whole UFO thing. Always. I came up, my 1st and 2nd grade, I did in the Nation of Islam's University of Islam. So at age 7, I'm hearing the Nation of Islam's teaching on the mothership and having, 1,200 baby planes on it. And it's a half mile by half mile square in the air. And, all of these things I'm hearing at age 7. So I grew up with this stuff. And so when I, fast forward to 1996, 1995, I'm working at an esoteric bookstore while in college, and I come across your book. And it is the very first time I see any literature on ufology that mentions Elijah Muhammad of the Nation of Islam and their ideas on it. So immediately I'm like, wait, hey, and I grabbed this book.
Well,
And
it was
I
more Malcolm X than Elijah Muhammad.
It was Malcolm X, that's right. Yes.
Yes. And Malcolm said something I guess he said it to Alex Haley, and it's in the autobiography,
Yes.
that he described his vision that he thought was Elijah Muhammad, upon whom be peace.
Yes.
Least I incur the wrath of. Look, I used to go to Underground Atlanta, and let's face it, I had to buy Muhammad Speaks because you had to buy it. I mean,
yes.
And the Black Panther newspaper. I mean,
yes,
that was right up the street from Underground Atlanta. So
yes.
Anyway,
yes.
So I saw this description that was supposedly his vision of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad.
That's right.
I thought, what does this description remind me of? Wait, Crowley said out of the corner of his eye, the Praetor-Human Intelligence, IWAS, which is a Near Eastern name.
That's right.
Is almost identical, almost word for word. I'm pretty sure that Malcolm X had not read Aleister Crowley. I may be wrong. Sure. He was a widely read person, but
right. I'm pretty sure.
Probably not.
Yes.
So yeah. I was struck by that. And then I noticed in many cases where you have a transformative being appearing, they have that same deal going on. I believe what Elijah Muhammad, no, it was not. It was Malcolm X said, not black, he's not white. He's got this, I don't know the term that he used, but it meant swarthy countenance, which is identical to North African people.
He said an Asiatic countenance.
Yeah.
Yeah. Asiatic cast of countenance was the wording.
And guess who said there? Well, you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's crazy. And you even mentioned in the book, whereas Spike Lee chose to use Elijah Muhammad, he was really describing Elijah Muhammad's teacher, Master Farad Muhammad. That's who was really describing that he saw, and which is a mysterious figure as well.
He appears and then he disappears.
And then he disappears.
Assuming that either Hoover or Elijah Muhammad bumped him off, I mean, that's not impossible, but he just appeared, did his moving and shaking, and then
gone.
Which is, that's true in UFO lore. It's true in all kinds of religious and non-religious lore, going back to Jacob and the angel,
Come on. Yes. And see, okay, that brings me to, in my show, and I'm saying this for the viewers as well, I mentioned in the first show that every show we're going to begin with our primary premise. And I'm honored to say to my viewers and to you, I'm honored that you have given me permission to use a large portion of the primary premise that you published in this book, because that in itself was, for me, an initiation without portfolio. It was an initiation, that premise.
It was meant to be. I mean, I was the original edition from Illuminate Press, the late, great Illuminate Press, was successful in terms of the small publisher that it was with. Good folks. Ron Bonds was a great guy, and ultimately, I think, a martyr to the work that he was doing, along with Jim Keith, who also did and Kerry Thornley, all of whom I knew, and all of whom died young and under questionable circumstances.
Yes.
And so, I mean, I even got warnings from other people, well, you better watch out yourself, because, and I said, well, if they want to get me, they're going to get me. But
Yes.
they will have to catch me off guard, which is hard to do.
Hard to do.
I mean, I'm looking at two katanas hanging on the wall, and I'm wondering, yeah, okay. So you're here to give me the polonium, huh? Reach out and give it to me.
Reach out and give it to me. That's right.
Yeah!
That's right. So let's start with the first one, and I tweaked them slightly, but not really. And what I want to get is kind of your thoughts, whatever comes to mind, when I read it. So the first one, there are those among us that are in the know about UFO phenomena and the appearance of this phenomenon throughout history. Some know the nature of this phenomena and have used this nature probably for as long as it has been observed. Thoughts?
Which is all of history and prehistory. I think it goes back to, if prehistoric shamanism was the same as primordial shamanism today, and I expect that it is, because of the remote places that, I'm not talking about people from Philadelphia that become shamans, I'm talking about the real thing.
Absolutely.
And I think that when the ice melted, they were the first religion, if you want to call it that. I think it was more like a spiritual path to emerge. And when they would trance, because that was a prerequisite to shamanism, you had to die and come back, or at least simulate dying and coming back, in order to become a shaman. That still, with certain groups, is a definition, and they use certain practices, but primarily it was illness and coming close to death, having a near-death experience, and coming back with powers that you didn't have before and insights that you didn't have before. So
make the ordeal severe.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And I think that you see that repeated, echoing down in prehistory to early history, right to the present moment. And the question that I've always had is there a direct continuity between that primordial shamanism and, let's say, the Sumerian or Babylonian priesthood, the fish god people, right on down to modern recipients of that wisdom? And one of two things is true. Either there is a direct continuity from master to student, from master to student, on down through the ages, whatever you call it in any particular case, and differing interpretations in different parts of the world, because culture tends to shape what you experience.
Correct.
Or people have been repeatedly intervened by the secret chiefs, which people would say, the secret chiefs? Yes, the secret chiefs of the third order. And that can be described as the nine unknown, as it is in India, the Lamed-Vavniks in traditional Judaism, the ascended masters in theosophy, and a lot of other things. The inner circle in the BSRF context.
In Shia Islam, it's the 12 imams.
Exactly.
Yes.
Or the 12th imam.
The 12th imam. Right. In our organization, in the Moorish Science Temple of America, it's the Royal Council of the Silent Brotherhood.
Same thing, in my opinion.
All the same. That's right.
What it's called will vary from culture to culture. I'm not sure that isn't by design from these ascended masters. They are They say, are these divine beings? In a sense, yes. In a sense, no. They are
Right.
human beings that reached a point where they no longer had to be corporeal. And there are two categories of that, well stated in Buddhism, that was my subject in postgraduate work. So
yes,
you need to see these things in the context of what the intent is.
okay.
And the intent seems to be the same throughout. You take a given person or group of people and set them on a path that will lead to where they are. So in Buddhism, that is called bodhisattva, which I'm confident that nobody knows how to pronounce correctly because Sanskrit is a dead language. But
right.
The bodhisattva is somebody who is capable of entering nirvana and becoming a Buddha, but chooses not to until all sentient beings are enlightened. And that seems to be, although bodhisattva is an Eastern term, I think that's the equivalent also of all of these different terms for the discarnate initiates who guide us. And I've been informed by that throughout my life, I guess, so that when you asked that original question, maybe the little boy Alan was, hey, this is something important.
Come on. That's right. Or as, somebody I'll bring up later on in the interview, who you have stated is probably the greatest occultist in the present era, our mutual, Michael Bertio.
Absolutely.
He may put it this way: we are just in this incarnation returning to work that we attended to in a past incarnation.
Well, I think Dr. Bertio is probably the greatest living magus, and I have met a lot of people who claim to be or who seem to be, but he's out there in public, and most are ascended as his master is ascended, with his assistance, and I think that he pretty much, he has his own designated organizations. I believe you're in the OTOA, and I was briefly. But he also has people like me who he empowers and then sort of spins off to do their own thing. And I, in turn,
that's a fact,
have spun off things in the same way.
That's
in fact. At one time, he was upset that I think it was his 25th anniversary, and he went to St. Louis, and I think he empowered his first female prelate. And only 25 people showed up, and he had been doing the work from the early 1960s until I forget when this was. It was mid 1980s. And he wrote me and he said, I guess my work is less recognized. And I, not to humor him or anything, but to tell the truth, I said, no, I think your work just is so spread out and diverse that it constitutes something that is part of culture long after all of us are dead and gone. It's just in the nature of things.
I think I would agree. As a matter of fact, there are a number of individuals that I won't name, in the occult world that level that, what you just said, as a criticism to Michael. Right. And,
the people that are in these top-heavy organizations that,
it's so
that
funny
want to enlighten you for a small fee.
I think you just intuited somebody who I was thinking about, but anyway.
Yeah,
That's pretty
probably
good.
so.
That's pretty good.
I've been there. It's not telepathy, it's experience.
That's pretty good. But yeah, and all right, let's move forward because we'll be on this one forever. Number 2, those in the know of the phenomena, those in the know are interactive with the phenomena and have long been so. Indeed, separating or distinguishing the phenomena, the legend, and the mythos it generates, the mythos makers, and the initiates of the nature of the phenomena is difficult.
Yeah,
what are your thoughts?
I wrote that in, well, I guess an earlier draft of it in the late 1960s, and then the book came out in 1974, wow. Was it?
Wow.
And I like to think that I have grown since then.
Yes.
But I would stand by that word for word. I do think the phenomena, we were talking about Dr. Bertio. He interacts with the phenomena. When I went to visit him, I thought I was the only person who had D&D dice on his private altar, on my private altar. I was wrong. So did he. And I thought, wow. Oh, okay.
Wow.
He rolls out universes. So I published an article called The Magic of Michael Bertio. Yes. And it was widely acclaimed, including by him, which was
nice.
Kind of
very
an ultimate compliment.
Yeah.
And I think that because then once I had picked up the ball, I rolled out a universe. And the truth is, reality is malleable. And there are many, many, many realities, maybe an infinite number. So whatever you roll out, whether you use that or what was the Kohanim's way of doing yes and no questions, or the I Ching, or anything that randomizes and then freezes in that moment. That moment is the moment that your universe is in. But Michael takes it a step further, and there are other universes that he is exploring, I think, simultaneously. I mean, I don't presume to be in his mind, but I know what he writes and what he says.
Well, now, to your point earlier about he has his order, and then he has side projects. So he's exploring via proxy through the side projects.
Absolutely. And I think with the orders that he has generated, of which there are several, they pretty much operate on their own.
Absolutely.
Because he doesn't want them to be slavishly devoted to his point of view. He wants them to discover in their own right. And that is precisely the point that I try to distinguish between the real and the others.
Yes. Absolutely. All right. Point number 3. The phenomenon itself is, and this is probably one of my favorites. The phenomena itself is inherently intangible, but is able to affect our reality in a phenomenological way because it is archetypal. Through the power of mythos, archetypes are very capable of setting tangible events into motion.
I stand by that one too. It's been years since I've read it, but I will go with that because again, the malleability of reality is something we really don't want. I mean, we like to have a floor under us lest we fall into oblivion. But the fact is that floor is negotiable. That floor is made up of atoms. The atoms are made up of subatomic particles. And when you say subatomic particles, it's very important for most people, even people that have taken physics in college, to know there are no particles at that level. The term particles is a convenience, like the high school atom with the ping pong ball circling around some other colored ping pong balls. That's nothing like reality. And then when you get down to that level, you're dealing with quantum reality, which is a whole different
ball game. And
yes,
so
it's a home run.
Right. And so like, my previous guest, Randy, speaks about that. He'll talk about things like translational physics. Well, yeah, now we're not talking about particles. Now we're talking about fields.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, anything with a vibration has a field.
And the human brain, which I think is more like the radio than the radio station, has these synaptic gaps which leave room for quantum processes to take place. One very interesting quantum process is quantum entanglement. Now, if we are entangled with other things and other things are entangled with other things, the universe looks far more like a mind than a machine.
Come on. To that point, I had a very brief conversation with Harold Puthoff. Are you familiar with the name?
Yes, I certainly am.
Okay. So I don't know if the viewers are, but look him up. But anyway.
Puthoff and Targ. Great.
Russell Targ.
The hippies who saved physics. They're all old hippies now, but they basically saved it from being static in the 1960s.
Come on. 70s. So to your point about this, what you said about the mind, or even the brain in this case, back in the early 90s, he authored some white paper on warp drive and the realities of warp drive and the possibilities of warp drive. And he said, of course it's possible, but what you would need is what he called an exotic substance. That exotic substance he defined as something that exists in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Right. And so, of course, without going into the crazy detail about gold in the high spin state and, those things, it's a fact that human brain tissue, by dry weight matter, 5% of it at least is platinum gold or platinum group metals in the high spin state. So there's literally parts of our brain that are in multiple places. You got quantum entanglement right there.
Almost as if it were by design.
How about that? How about that? So another thing too, and you and I have had these conversations before about this point number 3, about the phenomena being intangible, but has the power to impinge on reality. That's powerful. So to me, what it did, it helped deepen my understanding of gematria. And in the sense of, okay. And I'm kind of jumping ahead, but let's take the use of the code, the use of the code, right? That we're going to speak to, and that your book reveals, right? You have George Adamski, right? And his name, right, through the code, equivalent with Jesus. Are we saying that George Adamski was Jesus? No. But what we are saying is that because you have that numerical correlation, we could see similar pattern. We could see a pattern that we know the Jesus pattern, the Jesus archetype. We can almost presume, and that we're going to see similar things, and we do, and therefore we can intervene. Is that accurate? Or?
That's exactly correct. I mean, I'm not the great otherness. I'm not. I don't think any human being that is unascended is even capable of completely understanding, let alone the intentions.
Right.
But one can infer from effect whether the effect is positive for human beings or whether it's negative. Both happen, but both seem to have different origins. And that impinging seems to be a product of the multiverse and the fact that right now a mainstream physicist is trying to assimilate the whole notion of quantum mechanics, let alone that according to M theory, there are 12 dimensions. According to the multiverse notion, there may be an infinite number of alternate realities. And if infinite, that means whatever you can conceive of and things that you can't conceive of exist.
Correct.
But they're not ready to admit that those other realities can intersect with our own, even though according to mainstream quantum mechanics, if there is such a thing, in fact, how to put this? This is, without math, most of this stuff is very, very hard to do. And I'm not a mathematician. I can barely understand what they're talking about, but it's very, very hard to discuss without getting into the mechanics of it. And I think the mechanics may depend on systems of mathematics that we don't have.
Correct.
So, if it comes from a, but the point is, it can impinge upon us, at least on our consciousness, because these realities, as I was trying to say, are right here in the room with me and right there in the room with you. They are not, according to the orthodox view, if you can call it that, of quantum mechanics. They're not somewhere out there like, spaceships, or
they're not places of meets and bounds or a country to be reached.
No, they are right here. But they are in separate brains, branes, not brains.
Right.
Brains.
Exactly. That's right.
So,
wow. This is amazing stuff, man. This is amazing stuff.
You get to that edge, and then you're humbled by the fact that it really taxes the mind just to try and conceive of that type of reality. In fact, when Bertio rolls a hard 6, to borrow a term from Battlestar Galactica, it's a universe that exists by definition.
Right. But even the difficulty that you let in, just from my personal experience, the difficulty that you speak of from my personal experience is the deeper you go down the rabbit hole, the less of what you thought yourself to be exists.
Oh, yeah. There's no question about that. And people will get to, what do you believe? I said, about what? I don't believe anything. I have opinions that are subject to change. Most of what you've read there, I would say in almost exactly the same way if I were doing it now, probably with better command of the English language, but that just goes with the territory.
Yes.
I think that the ideas are still present tense, but there are things that I have said in the past, depending on how far back you go, that just simply did not pan out. And I have no problem with saying, oh, well, I was wrong about that. This is what I think presently, subject again to changes in ideas.
There you go. Point number 4, the masters of the phenomena become intertwined with the legend or mythos itself, thereby taking on the mythos's power to impinge. Those more fully immersed in the mythos are in control of reality to the extent that the mythos itself is in control. Such individuals also, in a very real sense, acquire the intangibility of the mythos. What are your thoughts?
I must have used the dictionary a lot there. But in all seriousness, I think at that point, if you grok in fullness that particular point, that's where ufology as such ends and magic and occultism begin. Because once you grasp that particular point, it requires energetic work that allows you to touch base with, fill in the blank, Enochian reality.
Come on. That's
yeah,
right. That's
whatever.
right.
Yeah, I mean, I have experimentally shown to my own satisfaction and those, that of those who were with me, that you can open portals to other, well, in Enochian, they're called ethers, but they're
Ethers.
other realities, and they're governed by their own rules or no rules. I really don't know that, but I do know on our side of the border that you can actually interchange things with that. I had one occasion where, well, this was in my OTO DAZE days, that I was performing the 30 Enochian ethers 1 week at a time. It took us about, I guess, 40 weeks because we took off for holidays. And
Yes.
in this particular one, the way it was set up was I did the induction.
Yes.
And I had a scryer who basically was the person who would go through the portal to that particular ether. And the people who were there, because I am a scientific illuminist,
that's right.
They were, I don't want to call it ignorant. I need to watch the term. They were people that I had picked who did not know a great deal about Enochian magic, let alone read accounts from high masters of what they found in Enochian working, from Dee to Crowley. And
that made them impartial observers, though.
That's my intent.
Yes.
And yet, when I did the induction, and the scryer would trance and go into this other place. In this particular occasion, the woman who was the scryer got into some kind of trouble on the other side. Well, I am a believer that magical weapons should be real weapons. That is, one time, shortly after 9/11, I was, as I had done many times before, taking my sword onto the plane. Actually, if I'd been there on 9/11, there would have been no 9/11. There would have been a couple of skewered fanatics, but that's,
that's right. That's right.
With box cutters, their last thought. This is not a box cutter. So, you should put that in storage. I said, they usually put it in the forward locker and not just pick it out and sit up. No, that's not what we do now. You're lucky we're not arresting you. Oh, okay, no problem.
Okay.
I'm going to Texas.
That's right.
It was to do initiations, which was exactly the case.
Right.
And so, gosh, I forgot where I was going with that.
Oh, about the you're talking about the Enochian experimentation over 30 days, and about the scryer got into some trouble.
Yes. So I took the sword that I used, which was a real sword. These particular swords, each of my sons, when they reached maturity, I gave them one. So nice. I don't have any Western type swords anymore, just katanas and lots of knives and guns and, anything you need for the apocalypse.
Come on. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I handed her the sword, and she received it in this other reality and was able to fend off whatever demon she was dealing with there. Fortunately for me, my eldest son, Alex, was present for this particular working, and he's, notwithstanding that he makes Lovecraftian films for the most part.
Nice.
He is very skeptical of real occult stuff. So this was one he even said at the time, that was impressive. And because it was handing a physical object. which became an intangible for here, but became tangible for wherever that was.
Wherever she was, right.
And it was useful enough so that the scryer was able to come back with minimum damage. She developed some kind of a skin condition after that, but she wasn't eaten by whatever it was she was
How
terrified
about that?
Yeah, how about that?
Wow.
So it seems to me that, getting back to the point there,
yes,
if you buy into that particular point, you really need to, well, first do a lot of sitting meditation.
Yes.
Because you will reach points where you need to cultivate that kind of benevolent indifference necessary to deal with, well, I'll pronounce it the incorrect way, Karanzan, and the Lord of the Abyss, and successfully transit that. And in order to do that, there are various ways, but being indifferent to what happens during that period is something you can cultivate in sitting meditation, jhana or Chan in China or Zen in Japan. Same difference.
Same thing. Yeah. You underscore something that my friend Randy in the previous episode leaned on, and that is, there is no fly-by-night occultism. There is no fly-by-night ufology. There's no fly-by-night New Ageism. It's not that easy, sit on a cushy couch and light some incense and float on a blue cloud and see Buddha. No, training is necessary, and one of the things that you had stated is that, this is real work where you could be in hazardous territory.
Oh, yeah. I think that there is one exception to that rule, which is in Christianity, it's called grace.
Yes.
The road to Damascus type experience, not asked for, but for reasons inscrutable to us, it's scrutable to them, and they make it manifest.
How about that? Yeah. You're like Paul of Tarsus gets knocked off the horse. Like, you just got drafted.
Yes, he got drafted. He was on a different path altogether, and he changed routes. And there are, William James discusses a lot of cases throughout history that basically boil down to that exact same thing. So does Dr. Buck's list of his version of enlightened beings, although most of them were male, which was interesting. He even has a little apologia in the back saying, no, well, he was a creature of his time, and he was a racist, and he was a sexist, but he was the first to write about these phenomena, and that preceded William James' Varieties of Religious Experience.
Yes.
They're not always perceived as religious. Sometimes they're perceived as spiritual. Sometimes they're perceived as physical events. It's what the deliverer wants it to be, plus what you take of it. My late friend Sam, who died young because he was a speed demon, and there was a time when every motorcycle cop in Atlanta knew him by name, and he finally took the middle of a fork in the road, and there was no middle. So but we discussed what things like, can an enlightened master be wrong? And the answer we came up with was yes, absolutely.
Yes.
Are there people who are enlightened masters today? And at the time, we were able to come up with 3 living beings that seemed to be among those. Of course, they weren't secret, because the fact is, most enlightened beings either are no longer corporeal, or if they're still, so to speak, in the flesh, they choose to be not visible, as they're able to do what they do and not get crucified for it.
Correct. You bring in your book, you bring up, you do a great job in humanizing, Like, okay, a lot of these guys simultaneously, they were involved in esoteric or occult matters, but simultaneously in fringe politics as well.
Yeah, I mean, that through a certain point in my life, I tried to do both, and I got a visit from the no,
First of all, a visit. That's whoa.
It was from the Light Lines people, Carla and Don Elkins, Eastern Airline pilot by day, trans-channel by night. I doubt that, well, they're gone, but the third person there, whose name I can't think of, who heads the Light Lines group now, which is mostly just, I think, a repository now, just an archive,
Gotcha.
not doing new work. But they had an interesting take on what they did, which was, we can teach anyone to channel, but we make no claims about the material that we channel in terms of its origin. That's up to the interpretation of the percipient.
Interesting.
And anyway, the third person, I wish I could remember his name. Look up Light Lines on Google,
right.
and you'll find. Anyway, he took me aside and he said, he didn't do the reading. Elkins did the reading, and he said, "Look, this wasn't part of the reading, but I got a very strong impression. You are trying to balance your political life and your spiritual life. You have to pick one or the other. You can't be both." And I said, no, you can pick both. Well, my political life sort of reached the point where I still have opinions. Yes. But when I reached the point that I couldn't outrun the cops anymore, I stopped being a street activist. And
how about that? Yes.
There were too many occasions where it was feet don't desert me now, and I was gone, because I tell you, the Chicago cops were the worst by far.
Wow.
They'd wait until the press went home and then start wielding, well, it was nightsticks in those days.
Ooh, man. Okay, last one. Point number 5. Such masters are informally organized worldwide, communicating through cipher codes, allegorical mystery dramas, and the symbology of secret societies and other bodies of initiation.
That one I probably would say probably, because I think there is some sort of interconnectedness at some level of all of these beings, even if they're categorized differently by different cultures. I think they're all on the same page, and they know about others that are on the same page. But I do think that for many purposes, it's best to think of them as decentralized, because there's no being in charge. It's not like Maharaja Nacha, one of the funniest
funny names,
or Ashtar Sharain, who I think is the dark side, because that comes from Babylonian demonology lore. Ashtar, Ashtaroth, same thing.
Ashtaroth, right.
Probably not your best. I wince every time I hear Ashtar command, Ashtar don't command me, and I can't run away from them. But
right. Don't fall for it. Exactly. Well, I'm going to tell you that point in particular, right? And my contemplation of that point, and then my observations, and then just experience. And then even especially with my religious organization, the Moorish Science Symbol of America, I saw a lot of weight to that statement. So much so that there's a particular researcher. I'll shout him out and give him, I'll shout him out. His name is Patrick Bowen, and I think I mentioned this to you a couple of years ago. He's a researcher and a doctor in conversionist religions. That's his field. That's his focus of study, specifically Islam in America. And he's done extensive research on my organization, others as well. And he was hitting like he was running into blocks, basically, like, not certain obstacles. It's just his research wasn't going where he wanted it to go. He was, and I suggested point number 5. I suggested to him, I said, listen, I know this is going to go against all of your scientific research sensibilities, but instead of looking for names of organizations and and membership roles and names, start looking at convergence of principles and ideas.
Exactly.
And it literally resulted in 2 gigantic books that he wrote.
Well, hey, there you go.
And he gives credit. As a matter of fact, I'm going to read this book you'll like. It's called Letters to the Sage, Selected Correspondence of Thomas More Johnson, Volume 1, The Esotericists. And in the intro, he says this. He says, so what I said was, he was talking about, he was looking at early Islam in America. I said, you should probably research the Hermetic Brotherhood of Light. That's what I said.
And
that's what sparked
a very wise statement. Although, you know, having tried myself to run down all of the different claimants and permutations that grew out of, well, first the Brotherhood of Ulysses under Randolph, and then the Hermetic Brotherhood of Light as it manifested in this country, first with Burgoyne in California, because he had a falling out with Davidson here in Georgia, where he was accused of being a moonshiner. But
right.
Well, he was a distiller in Scotland, but you know, he did. I don't know whether he had a still or not, but the fact is, he lived up in the area where the most, at the foot of the Blue Ridge Mountains, at the most medicinal herbs in the world. Because the Blue Ridge are, you know, they're not that impressive size-wise because they have eroded, and in turn, herbal developments there. They call the kids that go out every year to harvest them, they call them ginseng hunters. But they actually, that's not the only thing they harvest. Anyway, suffice to say, I think Davidson was distilling a certain amount of pure alcohol to make these herbal concoctions, because that's the way he made his living in order to support the Morning Star and his other efforts. So, you know, there's continuity there. There's also continuity with Max Theon, because he was their American representative in his later years. He muted things a little bit, because if you were in White County, Georgia in 1900, you watched what you said, or you weren't there anymore.
That's all right. To speak to the readers really briefly about, you mentioned Max Theon, right? Maximilian Bimstein, or not the readers, the viewers, but who was he?
He was, some of this is anecdotal, so just allow for that. He was the son of a Polish rabbi who became interested in tantric phenomena, which I go into in one of my books, plug. And you can plug them. I'm not going to.
Oh, I'm going to.
Okay. So he collaborated with Alma Ware, who became Sri Aurobindo's student eventually, was involved in the first permutation of the Hermetic Brotherhood of Light in Cairo, interestingly enough, which is where Crowley allegedly was when I was allegedly paid him a visit. In any case, he married a woman who was a very, very gifted psychic. And he was smart enough to recognize that. He lived in French Algeria, which is, you know, that period. And a place called Tlemcen, not very far from where Crowley did the vision and the voice stuff.
Right.
I mean, just, you know, miles distant. It's like kilometers only.
Right.
In any case, he decided to go to well, they would have said that Algeria was French, but they decided to go to France proper. And she drowned on the way there, and he ceased to do the trans-channeling. So it's apparent that she was the channel. He was the sort of the facilitator, I guess.
Yeah.
And his material was, he lived on into the early 1920s. So there's still a group, I think, in Israel that follows his particular teaching. So it's a direct lineal descendant of his cosmic philosophy.
Yes.
But in America, all that stuff, as far as I know, was only published by Davidson in the Morning Star, which was, continued up until I think 1913 when Peter Davidson passed away, although the family traditions are most interesting and they're most reticent because to one of the points you were making, Keel uncovered the notion of silent contactees, that is, people who have experiences and choose not to reveal them because they really don't want to be put in the dingbat category, as it's technically known in psychotherapy. And I don't blame any of those people, but I think there's far more in the way of occurrences of that sort than we are really able to, to categorize, because we don't see them unless we stumble upon them. In order for me to get an interview with the Davidson family, I had to put on my clerical collar and get my then Lodge Tyler to dress in clerical garb. And we met with a member of the Davidson family at the library in, well, it used to be Loudsville, Georgia, but that doesn't exist anymore because the post office closed. So, but we were able to, bridge the fact that I fell into my Augusta accent. And my Tyler, he was from Athens, Georgia, so he didn't have to fall into anything.
He didn't have
and
to
we
fall
said,
into it.
So tell us about Reverend Tyler and I, or tell us about the Hermetic Brotherhood of Light. It poured forth, and then I get the Clan Davidson Society magazine, and apparently the Peter Familius of that clan, he's passed on now, but he urged people to get in touch with me from the Clan Davidson that knew anything about that, and yet another member of the family said, "Oh, I give you permission to carry on the work." So, I'm as good a claimant as anybody, certainly.
Amazing.
I mean, I think that nobody, and this is true with the Golden Dawn, with the OTO, with the AA, there's nobody that is the exact lineal original. The point is to do the work and not to claim to be something that you're not. And
come on. That's right. That's right. All right. So now let's get into it, man. Arguably, this is like the magnum opus of Alan Greenfield's published work. This thing right here, Secret Cipher of the UFONAUTS. There is, I already know, because I've known you for a long time. There's some stories behind this book. What I'd like the viewers to know is what led up to it for you, personally. What led up to it? First of all, tell the viewers what this book, in short, gives, what it offers, what it presents.
Well, it's part one of a currently two-part book, and you can get them under one cover now, courtesy of my current publisher. It's called The Complete Secret Cipher of the UFONAUTS, and has the other book in it, which they were written at the same time. So, they were written to be part of a trilogy, and I was down in my hometown, Augusta, Georgia, and just spent several months writing, and here is the way that it came to me.
Yes.
In addition to my OTO Inc. folly for 20 years, I was involved with the order QBLH, which still exists and never has existed as some mass organization of, thousands. It's more like dozens at the most.
Yes.
But one of their greatest enthusiasts was, let's see how to put this, my second wife's second husband.
Oh, wow.
It turned out I was more in touch with him than with her. So we became good friends. And he had been, he was from upstate New York. He was part of, he was never
Buffalo,
in the OTO.
Buffalo, New York, right? Yes, yes.
Yeah. He worked at, is there a Ford Motor plant there? Or probably gone to China, but probably like everything else. Well, anyway, he was, his name was Tim Coutet, and he was a very complex person, and showed me the original British version of the cipher as developed by Jim Lees in England and several other luminaries, Carol Smith. I think in the book I cite Carol Smith, and she wrote me and said, no, it was Jim Lees that made the discovery of the cipher. So, I stand corrected on that. And Jake Stratton Kent, who I've heard rumors that he is now the poobah of the OTO in England, a fate he doesn't deserve. He's a good guy, and which is exceptional in that circle.
Yes.
So Tim had developed a computer program by night using the what do they call them? Mainframe computer at the Ford Motor plant where he worked. Right. By night, sort of under the table.
Yes.
How our radical newspaper was published by IBM that didn't know it was being published. Whoops! Cut that out. Prove it.
There you go. That's right.
So he developed a program called Lexicon, and I don't know anybody that has it now. I had it on floppy disk. And
so did I.
Even if I had a floppy disk, what would I put it in?
Exactly.
My publisher says he has a converter, but I no longer have any of those. That went out with the cassettes and the VHS, and when I moved where I am now. So
both Khalid and I are lamenting the fact that that's not around anymore.
Yeah, I think that in some ways is absolutely superior to any of the programs that are used now to use the cipher and decode it, because basically you could put any text in there. I even know a guy who was doing our recommended scrying method who was using the novel Ulysses.
Yes.
And it was very rewarding. I was skeptical at first. I thought that's going pretty far afield, and I don't understand anything the man is writing anyway, but let him run with it and we'll see where it goes, and the numbers will tell. And he was getting excellent results, not at the Khalid's level, but
right.
I think he's the best at doing the decoding.
For the viewers, I just wanted to say, we're speaking of, my good brother, former elected official career, elected official in Syracuse, New York. His name was Khalid-Bey. His sheesh, like his code work was just amazing. It still is.
Yeah, I think it's periodically ongoing, because there are still some degrees that he hasn't worked. In any case, getting back to the late and lamented Lexicon. I mean, somebody may have it out there somewhere, but not to my knowledge. You could input any text and then run it against the cipher, or if you use the star 26 module, you had thousands of alternate ciphers that were equally valid. But and if you had your computer draw those 26 points without repeating, every sigil that ever showed up in magical work shows up somewhere in there. In fact, if you put it on run, it was a mystical experience in and of itself. In any case, my initial response was, oh no, another occult, because I was the greeter at that time for the OTO Lodge. And we had, the god Horus and the reincarnation of Aleister Crowley walk in every other day, you know.
I'm sure.
Yeah. And you just go over there with the other Napoleons and
exactly.
But I thought, well, I wonder how this would work with these strange names, the funny names I said in the book of, Maharaja Nacha or Orthon or
Indrid
Cold, planetary names of planets that are not known to exist.
Right.
And I started inputting those, which are from ufology, not from occultism.
Exactly.
And got immediate, important, significant results. And from that, I became very seriously involved in that, and was fortunate enough that Lodge Babylon was where I was living at the time. And therefore, I mean, it was designed to be a high energy, and it was very high energy, residential lodge devoted to Kabbalah. And,
nice.
And specifically the magical interpretation of Kabbalah.
Yes.
As filtered through their newsletter, which was called Thelema. But the OTO Inc. people apparently got in touch with them and said, no, we own that. Supreme Court said so. So they didn't use that name anymore, but they were doing really good work. And in turn, I had the benefit of their knowledge of these subjects. So out of that and the jumble of things that I had found, which I think were, way beyond chance expectations. They scratch off up there too, huh? Okay.
Yeah, man. Yes, they yes.
Oh, well. My impressions gelled into the material that was in Secret CIPHER. And that in turn, by the time I got through with that, I thought, this is not showing you how to work with this. It's just showing you what it is. So I did the sequel. And as I said, now they're under the same cover, and there's talk about a third volume that my publisher wants to do. So we'll see. I'll believe it when I see it. It'll be mostly history.
I remember the first time you mentioned that there was to be a companion volume to the Secret CIPHER, the UFONAUTS. And I'm like, oh yeah? Where is it? And you said, well, it's in the hands of a friend. And it's not getting published until, at the time, it's like you were not publishing it. And
you know why, don't you?
Well, that's what I'm about to ask. You didn't go into detail, and I didn't press too hard. But because the seriousness of your response, and I said, you know what, I'm going to leave that alone. But I'd like you to speak to that as much as you can, or as much as you'd like now.
Okay. It's not like I have never discussed this.
Gotcha.
First, I gave the book to Ron Bonds, and he accepted it for publication, sent me in advance. But that was during my OTO Inc. period. And
gotcha.
Despite what they may say, I was a very good and faithful member until I decided that was not, worthy of someone really on the path.
Gotcha.
Anyway, the grand poobah of said order was then living in North Carolina, and we visited back and forth pretty frequently.
Yeah.
And I guess he got a hold of a copy of that first edition that you have there.
Yeah.
Which is probably, it's good that you have it in sealed in covers because I think it's probably worth a lot now.
Oh,
Because
wow.
when something goes out of print of mine, suddenly,
Yes.
you know, like the Complete Rite of Memphis was going for several $100s until it came back into print. And I thought, well, I don't get paid for that, you know, so
Right.
I would feel guilty if I, you know, took that kind of
That's
money.
this one.
Yes. Well, that's like the current edition, I think. And
Yeah.
it's reasonably priced, I assume. I don't have anything to do with, you know, editing
Right.
or
Right.
proofreading or whatever. I just write.
Mhm.
R-I-T-E, right. Yes. Okay, I get lost in the sauce. So
But that
where were we
second,
going?
well, that's that second
Okay.
edition, the
Okay.
secret rituals of the Men in Black.
Okay, it had been placed with Illuminat Press,
Yes.
and I went up to this little town that the Poobah was hiding out in because he was afraid that a rival OTO was going to assassinate him or something. I mean, I don't know. This guy, for a grand Poobah, he goes out for groceries a lot, and I think we did way too much acid in the 60s, but that's neither here nor there. So he said, you know, I really have reservations about this book. And I said, and I talked him into coming to Atlanta to perform an initiation that was beyond my grade.
Right.
At that time, I eventually reached that. So he drove us down. I remember exactly where we were. We were going past Tallulah Gorge, said to be an entrance to otherwhere.
The Yumwi Chumdi, the little people.
Yes, I've seen. If I were doing that over again, I would. That legend is not just a Cherokee legend. It's in common with a lot of little people legends that are identical to the ones in Celtic lore and West African lore.
Malidoma Some speaks. The late Malidoma Some speaks of that. Exactly.
Yes. And we get to Tallulah Gorge, and it was just narrow roads. And he starts on his tape deck. This kind of dates it. He's playing a jam session that he's having because he's a guitarist with Psychic TV, a forgettable band that. And I mean, crazy people and not very good. But he's playing that. And while he's playing that, he's telling me, you know, you really shouldn't be writing that book on UFOs. I said, really? I've written a sequel too. And he said, well, you know, this is really a problem for us. I said, us? Who's us? He said, yeah, the occult is respectable, but UFOs aren't. And I'm thinking,
what?
He's the boss, but clearly he's fried, because the reality is that the occult stinks in academic circles. It's maybe a little less so now, but still back in the day, it was, you know, way off limits or thought of as, you know, dark and evil or other good things. And whereas UFOs, there had been a survey conducted by Gallup that showed like 65% of adult human beings think that UFOs are real and that they're from somewhere else. Leaving aside the somewhere else notion, which usually reduces to nuts and bolts from outer space. I think that shows that the credibility of the UFO phenomena, forgive the term, trumps anything to do with the occult at that point. But he was going on and on about it as the Psychic TV, and he's playing with them. And that was, you know, the guy recently deceased that was the head of the band was very into internal body mod stuff, which is probably why he's deceased. But I thought, well, who is this guy? Anyway, I didn't say anything because it's like, being sexually harassed at work.
Come on.
If it's the boss, what are you going to do?
What are you going to do?
I said, yes, sir. Okay. So I put it on hold for 10 years.
Yes, you did.
Illuminat said, well, you can have it back, but you'll have to refund the advance that we gave you. I said, sure.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Then I placed it with Timothy Green Beckley, and Beckley said, well, I'll publish it, but I'm not going to pay you anything. I'll give you 100 copies and you can sell them. I said, well, I don't know. But as I spent 20 years in that order.
Yes.
And they made me a sheriff, a sovereign grand inspector general. And I happened to have a Delta free flight pass, being on, that I got from one of their security people. And legitimately, it was nothing.
Yes.
And so I was able to travel from lodge to lodge. And the more I saw of that organization, the less I was in it. And
Gotcha.
When I reached the point that I really didn't give a tinker's damn one way or the other, I started to seek, a way to bring out that edition. And I went to a sleazy publisher who made off with all the funds. And then my present publisher said, I would like to publish both books together. And I said, well, I don't know. And then the Hellier series came out, and suddenly it was a bestseller,
Come on. That's right.
So, the timing was wonderful. I thought, oh, this guy's going to, they're going to be, they'll print 1,000 copies and it won't sell it well. It's many thousands. And
beautiful.
I owe a debt of thanks to the Newkirks and their crew of younger, enthusiastic people with no agenda that I can see whatsoever. They're just following the synchronicities, which is what I sort of told them to do.
So let's talk really quick about some of the more detailed work of the book, of what's exposed in the book. In short, the book allows you, through the cipher code that was exposed and then later later expounded upon or explained, George Stansfield Jones, right? And then later made in a workable form through the lexicon program. And then applied, an occult tool applied to the funny names of in UFO lore, and for, again, the viewers, there's periods of, I guess you can call them periods, in the early 40s, 50s, or in the 40s and the 50s, UFO encounters, right? The aliens were very human in appearance. They spoke English. They, these types of, but almost in every single case, they had some weird name, and they had some weird name of a planet that they came from, or some weird phrase that was almost always communicated in the newspapers or in the publications, right? And you applied the occult tool of this code to those names. And what dropped out was very, very, very useful information that allowed you to meet, intervene, or in other words, interact with the phenomenon.
Absolutely. And what I originally hoped with that first edition was that people would pick up on that and use the cipher. I debuted it at the National UFO Conference in 1995, I believe it was, and explained it, in a talk that I gave there. And I expected, and I asked the audience, do you have any strange names that have shown up? Because I will allow that trans-channel material, whether UFO associated or not. A lot of it is, a lot of it isn't. If there are funny names, if it's not, Benjamin Franklin communicating,
right.
I'm not going to run the name Benjamin Franklin, but if it's
right.
Wuzu Wuzu, I'm going to say, how do you spell that?
Exactly.
And go through it, because that clearly is a signal. And I didn't want to do the heavy lifting on it. I wanted other people to do it, because I had initiated this and used the word guardedly, and I had hopes that other people would take it up. A few did. You're one of them.
Yes.
A lot of other people did not. And even though I think the book sold out, I mean, Ron was gone before I had any opportunity to really go through statistics and stuff. And it wasn't like in those days you could get analytics on everything,
Correct.
You sneeze and you get analytics on.
There you go. That's right. That's right.
How many sneezers in America right now? Well, it's spring, a lot. Okay.
Exactly.
So I guess that you are here. And I expected people to do it, but very few did. Although since the episode of Hellier that was Hellier season 2, I don't know, was it episode 8? I don't remember. Called The Trickster, which sort of made me go, no, wait a minute. Are they saying I'm a trickster?
I'm a trickster now. Okay. right.
Yeah, you see, I have this talk that I give on the various permutations of the tarot card, usually called the magician.
Yes.
There is the mountebank, the ne'er-do-well, the juggler, the magician, and the magus. And I said, if you are to be a magus, you need to be all 4 of those, according to what the circumstances allow. Because some of what you say is allegorical fable.
Yes.
Some of it seems to defy gravity, but just as a skill.
Yes.
Some of it is ritual magic, the kind that, that these organizations purvey. And only if you do all of those can you see the archetypal truth that will make you a magus.
That's big. That's very big. But that's, I'm sure, I'm preaching to the choir, that is heavy lifting for the masses of people. Yeah, man. Nobody wants to feel, they don't really want a flying carpet. People want, it's got to be solid under my feet, and I get it, but my own work, I'll tell you, my own work with the CIPHER code, listen, when you said in the book, it yields immediate results, immediate relevant results on the first try, I said, okay, let's see. And sure enough, to the point where it's almost spooky, where you're like, I don't know if I want to open that door, I worked it with names, with names, first and foremost, in my own religious organization. I said, okay, let's see. So I plugged in the founder of the organization, the More Science Symbol of America, Drew Ali. And just the words Drew Ali, I took Noble off, but Drew Ali, it yields 72. Guess what else that yields? Randolph.
Well, there you go.
And guess what else yields? The word vine. So one of the things that adherents to the More Science Symbol of America teach is that Noble Drew Ali is a reincarnation of Jesus. See?
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. I mean, like immediate. And then you start to see patterns. Like there's so many correlations between Randolph and Drew Ali. So many. It's weird. It's weird. There's tons. And then of course, our brother Khalid was doing work and he was following the CIPHER trail of Indrid Cold.
Yep. And so was I, but
yes,
with interesting results. Apparently, the Hellier group found the place where we found, or this guy Terry, who I haven't seen in 50 years.
I was about to bring him up, but go ahead. I was about to bring him up.
Just don't ask if I'm him, because I'm definitely not him. And I guess that I wonder why I didn't put that in a separate volume. It was an afterthought tacked onto the end, so the book was a little thicker and people would buy it, you know.
Right.
But I mean, I know a couple of people that also knew him back in the day, but they're people from my political group. And we all had noms de guerre. And that's as far as I can go with that, because I can't, you know.
Absolutely. Yes. Wow.
The one thing I specifically remember, other than the interviews, where we all went to see the David Lynch version of Dune together. The whole collective went together, and all of them had read the books. I had not. And they were unimpressed by the movie. I was enthralled and read all of the books all the way through to through Chapter House, and all the ones that were actually written by Frank Herbert.
By Frank Herbert,
yeah. So the moral is sometimes, you know, movies don't reflect the books.
Right.
And sometimes they will encourage people who didn't read the books
to read the books.
Yeah, the original and God Emperor, those are books like, if they're that thick, I generally shy away from them. You know?
Yes.
Tolkien. You do go on and on and on and on.
Oh yeah.
Through 6 movies, all in New Zealand. I mean, there is too much of a good thing, but I was, you know, I was enthralled with that, and still am with that version.
Yes. Very nice. So on to your friend Terry, which again, for the viewers, that's a nom de guerre, right? He's spoken of in the book. There's an interview, which is very, very powerful. And at a particular point, Terry speaks about coming across your the cipher, using it, and applying it to the Mothman case in West Virginia, and going out to actually meet the alien Indrid Cold, and using just information from the funny names and other things, he gets a description and a literal address. That's crazy.
Well, you see, what my thought was at the time, was that this was a low-tech means of communication among aliens, adepts, whatever you want to call them. They're kind of one slides into another. Rather than use, let's say, telepathy, which they're fully capable of doing, telepathy like a telephone message can be intercepted.
Correct.
But a courier either is or is not. You know, it's not a question of, I mean, if the courier disappears or is killed, then sooner or later you know that that the message did not get through and that somebody intervened. But if it does get through, so how does the courier know anything? The cipher seems to be a way that if you have an incident and the being or beings or whatever say, "Hi, my name is Terry Cold."
Yes.
You have to run Terry, I don't know what that would be, Terry Cold through the cipher, and if it looking specifically for something that hints at a date and a location. And there's an art to doing that, but you can often find a specific date and a specific location.
Yes.
And if you go there, something big will happen. It may be a UFO sighting. It may be Yeti type phenomena. I hate the term Bigfoot. It sounds like big feet, size 15 shoe. I need a shoe. It's a Yeti or I said, Mr. Abominable, whatever.
Whatever. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that was to be the major test that I was fine. I said, report it to me if you get a hit. And
Yes.
conversely, if you report to me nothing happened, let me know that too, because
Absolutely.
once I gave that talk, I kind of assumed that the supernal powers would change the code because I was exposing it. But as long as it was, it wasn't the first cipher. I mean, Enochian is a cipher, and there
right.
are Masonic ciphers in certain degrees.
The Kabbalah of 9 chambers.
Yes, the Kabbalah of 9 chambers, the Bekir. And I just felt that it was a self-proving thing or a self-disproving thing. So there you go.
Right.
I mean,
right. It's just amazing, that rightfully is a technology. And like you said, even though it's low tech, it flies under the radar, right? In light of the fact that there are the technologies out here that literally would boggle the mind, right? It makes perfect sense that smart people who, would create such a thing that would fly under the radar. You would think people are trying to take it higher and higher and more advanced, but that's where everybody else is. But you got, names scrolled on a piece of paper and you pass it along. That's pretty low tech.
And that seems to be the choice here. I mean, if you want to, I don't know when this will air, but if you want to be, contemporary, apparently some of these confused Russian genocidal bastards were using their cell phones to do strategic information. And of course, that was intercepted, and predictably so. Anything that involves electronics can be intercepted, but a courier is a courier. Either they get there or they don't. So there you go.
That's right. Something I wanted to go back. The science fiction community, science fiction writers in the 50s and the early 60s, totally different bunch, right, than what we see today. How would you describe it? It's something I read it, in your book, and we've talked about it, about, the science fiction community back then being totally different. You got Shaver's work, you've got, of course, Philip Dick's work, right? Randy said this. He used to write. He mentioned he wrote science fiction in those days, and he said, as a very matter of fact, he said, "Yeah, you had to be a channeler back then." That's exactly what he said.
Whoa!
Yeah.
I can't imagine Arthur Clarke channeling. From under the ocean, they're coming.
Right.
Now, Lovecraft, I can believe he was channeling in dreams and having really, really, really dark dreams.
Yes.
Of course, as I've pointed out, his Silver Key and Through the Gates of the Silver Key, which he co-authored, that's a key to the very things we're talking about. That's not part of the Cthulhu mythos.
Right.
Cthulhu.
How do you pronounce that? Yeah, right.
Say Gesundheit. Cthulhu.
Right.
I don't know. It's likely that he was channeling, although I think he would have denied it because I don't think it was conscious. I think it was literally dreams. I know Stephen King, who is not anywhere near as macabre as Lovecraft. His earlier works, he said, were his wife's dreams.
Wow.
Which I would have gotten a separate bedroom if I were. No, I don't mean that.
Yeah.
But I mean, it was, strange. Cujo and, it's
yeah. Wow. So Shaver's work, I never heard of Shaver until reading your book.
Really?
And yeah, and so Shaver's work, man, and then to say, later he only goes, okay, yeah, well, guess what, guys? It was real. It wasn't science fiction. Okay. There really are little people under the ground, and they really are commanding, or in commandeering old ancient advanced tech that was left there. And yeah, that stuff's real. And then the, guys like Terry, who, there were actual cavern groups. Like, that's insane, man. Can you speak to that? Can you talk about that? That's insane.
Yeah, I can tell you what they think is going on. I'll tell you what I think is going on.
Gotcha.
I don't think the earth is hollow, and I don't think there are beings in the middle of the earth, but I do think that in certain places, certain caves, for example, the cave system under Appalachia, really under the entirety of Appalachia, has one or more semi-permanent portals to various otherwheres. And
Alan, can I pause for a second? The military insider Emery Smith corroborates that. Exactly what you just said. But go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, Jacques Berger did a less well-known book called, I think it was something like Secret Vaults of the Earth, where he maintains that, and has a kind comment to make about me too. Yes. My friend Jim Mosley used to say, "Is something wrong with you, Alan? You always look at the index to see if you're in the book." And guilty. So I know where I've been mentioned and where I haven't.
Yes.
I won't say that Volet never mentions me, even though we had a meeting, but why should I? I don't feel bad about it.
Right. Wow. But so yeah, we're talking about this, the caverns, there are actual cavern groups, and like Terry's excursion that he speaks about in the book. Man, that's wild.
Yeah, and I roughly know where he was talking about. And I have dissuaded any number of people from trying to find that particular location. I've tried myself, but I wouldn't go in there because one of two things is true. It's a portal to a very, very dark place run by very, very dark creatures who have very, very, very high technology at their disposal.
How about that?
And the other possibility is more mundane, but still dangerous. As any miner can tell you, or any miner's canary could tell you if they were still alive.
Yes.
Mines sometimes contain gases that are psychedelic in nature and that can entrap you as well. Everything from carbon monoxide to whatever it was that the Oracle at Delphi inhaled, or the Purgatory of St. Patrick's in Ireland, where ordinary people go in and have these quote hallucinations or experiences. I'm not sure that they aren't on the border between our real and some other real, but that's that's where the situation is. When you delve deeply enough, you're never really sure that even this reality is real. After all, we are not in these positions. We are projecting through electronics, and it's being refined and continuously updated.
That's right.
You really are sitting somewhere, and I really am sitting wherever I am.
Yes, correct.
Before the program, I was sitting in darkness in in a cave.
Yes. Right. You Terry, to your point, Terry mentions in the interview that after that ordeal, he was just like, we're screwed, man. Like, he was looking at it from the very material, mundane perspective. Like, okay, there's some real beings down there with real high technology, and we're hopelessly outclassed, and it's kind of over. but then later got into ritual magic and the occult and saw similar beings whipped up in a circle, right?
Mm-hmm.
And said, okay, wait a minute. Wait a minute now. Maybe we're dealing with something else. And it's to the point you just made, like, okay, either it is very grossly physical, or you got one foot in one world and one foot out of the other. You're kind of in the in-between space.
It is important to note that I only knew Terry for about a year. He came into my political circle, which
Yes.
most of the people in that circle were rabid materialists. So they didn't talk about any of this stuff. Right. Maybe a little goddess discussion among the more feminist members, but it was not. So Terry and I were the only ones there that had an interest in that. And I don't even remember how it came up, but probably at one of our meetings or after the meeting or whatever, it got mentioned. And we were, the point being, I only knew him for about a year.
Gotcha.
So I can't verify any of the things that he said, except on the occasion of the Indrid Cold thing.
Correct.
Would never have occurred to me. I thought it was at the time, it was a one-time thing, because none of these other cases that have come out involving Indrid Cold had been public at that time. Although apparently the initial percipient's family knew Indrid Cold all throughout, or whatever his real name was.
Wow.
And so that's only come out.
For the viewers, really quick, Indrid Cold is one of the characters in the very real Mothman, sightings in the 60s, and subsequently the Silver Bridge disaster. So all of that's connected. As a matter of fact, they did what do you think of the movie with Richard Gere?
I think that it's fairly accurate.
Yes.
I can't see John Keel, who it's modeled on, as Richard Gere or vice versa. Not at all. I don't know Gere, but I did know John. And as a contemporary ufologist who's still around, once said, if there's anybody in this field that's one of them, it's Keel.
Whoa.
And I thought, whoa. Very strange guy. Took him to lunch once and he said, I don't like food.
What?
And on top of that being a very uncouth thing to do, because I was buying him lunch at the Flying Saucer restaurant in downtown Atlanta.
Yeah.
It was weird. And he was a weird guy. Came over to my parents' house and unscrewed the telephone to see if there was a tap on the line. Wow. I mean, it was.
Yeah.
He came out of the men's magazines of the early 1960s. No, not Playboy. I'm talking about Saga and True and Argosy. That their feature stories were usually things like, I washed up on the island of lost women. That was the kind of appeal. So that was his writing style. And he brought that to his ufology stuff, which seems to have started when he was here in Atlanta to give a talk to our group, and then chose not to avail himself of the flight back that my daddy had arranged, because I talked him into paying for his trip, but instead took a rental car because he wanted to go to West Virginia to see what was going on there. So,
wow.
So that may have been the beginning of that journey. But I would say, if you saw the movie and don't take it too literally, which you should never do with any movie.
Correct.
You will find it to be a pretty good analog of what actually the original West Virginia cases were like. Gray Barker's book, The Silver Bridge. It captures the mood a lot better than Keel's book, which only captures the facts, or what he saw as the facts.
Right. Got you. Okay. Let me ask you, with the writing of The Secret Cipher, the UFONAUTS, and then lectures or whatever, public appearances, have you gotten any visits?
That's an interesting question. Let me think about that.
Like, and what let me add to that. Visits as in like, you might be you should be careful, that type of thing.
Yes.
Okay.
On one occasion, and it was very memorable because it was not with some enlightened, well, I think the secret chiefs and the actual Black Lodge are equal in terms of their abilities, but the difference is what they've chosen to do with them. One is progressive and elevating to others. The other has some kind of interest in keeping the world in ignorance.
Wow.
And this guy, when I was at Euless Lodge,
yes,
this guy who was a dead ringer, probably he actually was more a tulpa than a person, but he was a dead ringer for Charlie Manson, shows up and he starts peddling what was then the latest in many versions of the end of the world, the harmonic convergence, I think it was. And I thought, well, he's going around to people and trying to scare them. So what does Alan do at this point? So as he's going to leave, I've said nothing to this guy. I'm, just listening, eavesdropping. So he's getting in his van with the other members of the Manson family.
Wow.
And I said, a date. I just pulled it out of my repertoire of December 7th, 1994. You best watch that, whatever the date was that I used. I said, that's when you'll have your convergence. And I just faded into the shadows. And I could see that moment where the cocksure attitude on his face went, uh-oh. And I thought, well, I've defended the lodge successfully by being a mountebank, by being a hoodoo. I've hoodooed worse than him. And anyway, so a few months later, I think it was.
Yes.
This is a long story. Do we have time for this?
No, we got time. Go.
Okay. There was a neo-pagan gathering at Hard Labor Creek State Park. Only Georgia would have a Hard Labor Creek State Park. Anyway, the OTO was invited as a group to come down and show what we do.
Yes.
Not that we could show what we do, but we could show the Gnostic Mass, so we did.
Yes.
Twice. Anyway, that guy was there, and I thought, what is going on here? Right. So the organizers of this event decided to have, or they already had planned, I don't know, a raffle. And it was, you were supposed to contribute money that was going to be used for, I don't know, cleanups or whatever. And this guy came forward and said, if you win the lottery, whatever you call it, the contest,
right,
you will receive breakfast from a naked slave.
What?
And I will go and clean up Arabia Mountain.
Really?
And I thought, this is a long way from Arabia Mountain. Nobody in those days even knew it existed. Even people that lived there, they'd say, oh, you mean Stone Mountain? No, I don't mean Stone Mountain. Arabia Mountain. But it's, you have to see the fact that it's very old and it's not developed. So it's shielded. I think there are people that go to the Arabia Mountain High School who think that it's named for a mountain in Arabia, because you can't see it unless you are in one or two places where you can see through the trees, because all the silt has gotten down to the base, and therefore it's surrounded by trees and brush and all that sort of thing.
Right.
And so he's mentioning Arabia Mountain as a prize here. I thought, well, let's see. Because there were, like, I would say 300 people there.
Yes.
And most of them put their name in the hat or whatever it was.
Right.
So when he drew my name,
Ooh.
I wasn't totally surprised.
Ooh.
The young lady showed up with the breakfast, and I said, give that to our, maybe because my wife at the time was there too, but I said, give that to the people, people that are that are in the building with me. And I thought, Arabia Mountain, I win out of several hundred people.
Come on.
What is the likelihood? So later in that same day, I think it was, I walked towards the communal hall where everybody was eating. Yes. And there he stands between me and the door to the thing. And he reaches out his hand, and reflexively, since I'm from the deep South,
absolutely,
I grab his hand to shake it, and he has a ring that has a pricking thing.
Yeah.
You know?
What?
And I thought, if that's poison, I'm dead.
Right.
But it wasn't poisoned.
Okay.
And I'm alive.
Right.
But I wouldn't have been. And the message was exactly what you were saying.
Gotcha.
Watch out. We can get you anytime we want to.
Gotcha.
And one of my first disillusionments with the OTO Inc. was I did an article on the Black Lodge. This is before the David Lynch popularization of that. And way before, actually. Yeah. Well, no, not that far, maybe 6-7 years. And the then lodge master at Euless, who it turned out had never read the book Euless, which put me on to reading it. And that was my discovery of Randolph and how he's under-recognized in the occult field. I think for, frankly, totally racist reasons.
I would like to, really quick, I would like to just extend the idea of doing a second interview specifically on Paschal Beverly Randolph.
That would be good.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, but go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Let's see. Where was I? You get old, you get a little bit fried in the brains. It's somewhere in there, I'm sure. Transmitting from the Akashic record.
You know, we were talking about that whole thing about, anybody can get you. They can reach out and touch you.
Right. So I did an article that it had some basic information. I think this is stuff my current publisher has cast a very wide net for stuff that I've written over the years. He says he wants to put all of it in print or back in print or whatever. And I said, don't go back before mid-1970s because I are not all that literate.
So listen, last thing I want to talk about, you actually dovetailed perfectly right into it, right? Crowley mentions, and you actually mentioned it in your book, that we're in a very real war, right? And that war between what could be called the Great White Brotherhood and then the Black Lodge or the Black Brothers, right? Now, of course, right off top, because we're Westerners in America and we're so socialized into believing that people are these colors, that we immediately racialize the terms. But you mentioned in the book, for instance, one of the greatest manifestations of the Black Lodge was the Nazi Party.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And
Right.
the whole Aryan race theory is both a Nazi theory, and it's clearly Black Lodge in its orientation. I do avoid the term the Great White Brotherhood because it's going to be
understood.
It sounds like you're talking about the Klan, you know, and
yes,
it's nothing like that. And Black Lodge, I just haven't found a good substitute term for it. Not because I think that, as you say, that kind of militant, you know, that reality is black and white. Nothing is black and white.
Nothing is right.
But I haven't found a good term for it because in the way that the term black is used as a term for
no, I agree. We're, you know, as you know about our organization, the Moorish Science Symbol of America, we're adamant about the fact that, you know, these are not proper ways to identify human beings. You know, there you go.
Right.
It's just not the way to do it. We know human beings.
You have to recognize that a lot of people don't have benefit of that insight. So
that's a fact.
What you say may be misinterpreted, and I try to allow for that because all of the ideas that I have in certain contexts would be considered demonic or satanic or whatever.
There you go.
And I'm neither a demon nor am I Satan.
Right.
No, I do play him on television. No.
Right. So, but to the point of, you know, those two opposing forces, right, and humanity kind of being in the middle. One of the things that Crowley says about that is, and you mentioned it earlier in this recording, is very powerful, right? In the saying that Crowley said, I believe that we're in a real world war, and that it is the objective of the Black Lodge to prevent people from thinking. One of the things that Noble Drew Ali is famous for saying is, if I can get you to think, you can save yourselves. Right?
Exactly.
And so that kind of lets you know what side of the war he's on. You know what I'm saying? In the movie The Matrix, the third one, Matrix Revolutions, Neo was talking to the Oracle, and he says, you know, well, the architect says if that Zion's going to be destroyed less than 24 hours. Oracle goes, that's how he thinks, you know, everything to him is an equation that has to be solved. That's his purpose, to balance the equation. And he says, well, what's your purpose? She said, to unbalance it. And what it brings to mind, right, and I'm sure you're very familiar with this, the seemingly purposeful misinterpretation and misrepresentation of Genesis in the book, in the terms good and evil when referring to the tree of knowledge, right? And how, you know, Tov and Ra are translated as good and evil, when Tov really means to keep stable or implies stability, stagnation. Ra implies movement, motion, stirring up, activity, but it's interpreted as evil, right? Well, to get people to think, you got to stir things up.
What is the role of any prophet? To speak truth to power. What is power? Man. There's political power, but there's also smugness in anybody. And if you say, that's a very smug thing for you to say, and here's why: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You are speaking truth to power. You are being prophetic.
Woof. I like it. You know, and we're really, you know, and that's the easy route. The easy route is to sit back and do nothing and let somebody else think for you. or to reward yourself when you've not accomplished anything. Or to distract yourself, like Crowley talks about what the Black Lodge is doing with what he called the sons of the soil or the man of earth, right? To unfit him for his evident purpose, which is to the creation of supermen, And
there's another term though that I don't translate it. I leave it in the German Übermensch, because Superman denotes the guy with the big red S on his chest. And that was sort of by design. The two guys that created Superman were both Jewish, and it was 1938, and the Nazis were saying Jews are subhuman. So you don't have to, think that it was conspiratorial for what were their names? Something and Schuster, not Simon and Schuster. They created the bespectacled, mild-mannered reporter for a great metropolitan newspaper, but that wasn't his real identity. His real identity was the Superman.
Isn't that something?
Yeah, it was.
Wow. Right.
War of the Worlds, and 2 years later, Superman was fighting the Nazis. They were like Batman and all the other.
That's right. So with that being said, right, I'll ask you this question. I asked this question of my last guest. The idea of disclosure, right? What, or post-disclosure, as it relates to the event of disclosure, what can you say to the viewers regarding anticipation, preparation? What are some of the things we can expect to see? How much of what we see we can trust?
I think if you're talking about the government, disclosing information, I think that you would find that longtime researchers like you, like myself, probably know more than the government does. Their major concern is to keep secrets secret. And the secrets that they have are mostly, aircraft that we don't know yet what they are. But I don't think it has anything to do with quantum physics or visitations from other realities. The closest you'll get would be the experiments that were done with the men who stare at goats, the attempts to do far sightedness, and that, as a government project, as far as I've been able to ascertain, ceased to exist. Although some of the same researchers, Buntoff and Targ, come to mind.
Yes.
We were discussing that before the program, I believe.
Right. Yes.
Yeah, they have continued to work in that direction, but unfortunately, there's not a new generation of physicists who seem to imply. I think that actually what disclosure will really be will come out of quantum biology, which is a term that's only been circulated outside of very, very few persons.
I gotta tell you, that's the first time I've heard that.
It's new. It's I predicted, I said, it will come out of quantum physics, or if the implications of quantum physics ever get applied to biophysics, expect quantum biology to change everything. And I think that is the case, because that will be the accessible transformation that will come probably not from any government. If we're fortunate, it won't come from the Chinese government that's doing, no holds barred research, and a lot of it weaponized.
Yes.
Like that Ford Motor Plant we were talking about. It probably is in Peking now, you know.
Right. It's so powerful that you said that, because, wow. I coined a phrase, and again, it's based on bioenergetics, which we know is very high tech, but it's very ancient, right? And so I coined a term, and the term is bioenergetic transhumanism. You know, and I coined the term to describe my personal perspective on human bioenergetics, the training and the development of it in the modern time, especially in light of the idea of transhumanism really just being a cool word for cybernetics and, you know, human machine mergers type of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and
I do indeed.
I kind of abhor that. I'm not a fan of that, because I'm a firm believer, you know, as a craftsman, as a, you know, as a builder, I'm a firm believer that this is the real temple. And therefore, inside of it is the real technology, you know, and that outside mechanical stuff is just, if it's the misinterpretation of Tov and Ra, you know. It's the misinterpretation. It's another extrapolation of that misinterpretation where, no, human being, you go to sleep. I got this machine that'll think for you.
Yep. Started with calculators, and we're using one of the descendant bodies right now.
Yes, we are.
So we're not sitting down in person and being human beings. We're being electronic forces beaming out into empty space.
Or to your point earlier via email, hey, how are we going to do this? We're going to Zoom, Skype, telepathy. You know,
Sharif is calling, and he wants to know.
That's right.
What are you, Terry Wrist? No. I barely knew the guy. I interviewed him. I interviewed Kerry Thornley. Am I Kerry Thornley? No, he's dead. Dead.
Oh man, listen, this is absolutely amazing. I had people, I had kind of leaked it on Facebook and a couple of other social media platforms that I'd be interviewing you, and they were like, "What? Like, you got that guy?" Like, you know. So there are people looking for this. They're definitely looking forward to this, you know. And I definitely want to do, you know, bring you back on and talk some other specifics about P.B. Randolph. You know, another one of my favorite books of yours, The Story of the Hermetic Brotherhood of Light, where you have a lot of Randolph stuff inside the book.
Yeah, I think that is after it was published in Europe by a Swedish publisher who I think was also a Satanist, but be that as it may, it was part of the effort of the Grand Poobah, the OTO Inc., to get me away from writing about UFOs. So somehow or other, he said, "Oh, I can get you published." And so he calls his satanic friend in Sweden. I said, "Okay," but it's back in print now because that publisher no longer exists. So my current publisher, I think, has put it back in print or is about to. I don't, you know, again, I don't have anything to do with the publishing end except to receive royalties, frankly.
There you go.
Yeah, I think that you want to do a program about Randolph, we'll have to talk about both him and his legacy and how that is, in a sense, suppressed. And that is, as far as I can tell, I can't think of any other reason other than racism.
Wow.
I mean, give me another reason that it could possibly be. Well, it was sexual stuff, but Crowley is, you know,
come on, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. And was not real careful with his words, and Randolph's words were very Victorian decorative, you know. Correct. And then his wife of a year something, sold the rights to the Brotherhood of Light to this outfit in Pennsylvania that I think still exists, the Beverly Hall Corporation, but they expunged all the sexual stuff. You know, so if you read Euless from the Beverly Hall Corporation, it's a different book than if you have the first edition from Cincinnati. And
right.
It's a long, involved discussion, and I have my own take on where Randolph came by this knowledge. But
got you. Wow. Okay, okay. That's a show. Okay, don't talk anymore about it. That's a show. That's a show. Listen, thank you so much. Thank you so much. You know, and we'll definitely have you back on. I'll definitely have you back on. All right, everybody. This is Gate to the Age, and I'm your host, Sharif ANAEL-BEY. Thank you for watching. Peace.
Pray for peace.
Yes. Hold on.